Okay, everybody, welcome back to the final episode in the professional series. We are going to cover the approach and the landing phase of the flight that we have been doing in this series. If you haven't watched the other videos, I highly recommend that you do so you know where we are and you don't get lost. So we're flying from Dallas to Phoenix. We're in cruise. We're approaching our 250-mile distance, which is typically when the crew will start briefing the approach. So I'm going to start a little bit early here so I can walk you guys through some of the stuff. So as we're sitting up here in cruise, fat, dumb, and happy, what we like to call it, as we approach the airport environment, we need to start prepping the aircraft for its approach. Now, what we're going to do, I was going to do an ILS into Phoenix, but since I've already done an ILS on my channel several times, I've done a localizer. What I haven't done is we haven't done a GPS approach, so we're going to set this up for the GPS approach to runway 25 left. So first thing that I will do as I approach the 250-mile threshold is first thing we want to do is we want to verify all our altitudes on the arrival. We want to make sure that the arrival is proper. So let's go ahead and go here. I want to change the approach. We're going to do RNAV 25 left, a Yankee. That's right. Ping 1 via driver. Insert. Alright, so what we want to do here to prep the arrival, make sure your constraint mode is on. I like to zoom the range down to 20 or 10. I'll also pop up the ND here so it'll be a little bit more clear for you guys. What we're going to do is we're just going to step through the flight plan here. And we want to make sure the aircraft, it is in plan mode, because that's the only way you'll be able to see this is in plan mode. So flip this to plan mode, zoom your range down. Driver is the first fix. We've got a little top of descent arrow there. Then we approach Binker, which has a restriction between 25 and 28 at 280 knots. Hybrid between 22 and 25. Ping above 17,000 feet with 270 knots, that matches. Birdie above 13, 250 knots. Par between 10 and 12,000 at 230 knots. If you're a golfing fan, you'll understand why this is called the Ping 1 arrival. Perky between 9 and 8, 210 knots. And then we're going to transition to, let's see, FINAP, which is, if I am, no, that's still in the arrival, so FINAP between 6 and 5,000, that's there. Then Gipsy at or above 4,000. That is the first fix on the RNAV 25 left Yankee. As you can see that right here in the McDo. RNAV 25 left Yankee, first fix is Gipsy at or above 4. Then we have Navok, which is above 3. And then our final approach fix is Tekui. I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm sorry, that's not our final approach fix. Our final approach fix is Navok, and that's just an intermediate fix in between Navok and the runway there, Tiki at 1880. It's a visual descent point, essentially. According to the chart, Tiki or Tikoi would be if you're using LNAV only. But since we have LNAV and VNAV, Tikoi is not necessary for us. We're going to continue on down on our descent, but that's shown there on the chart. Alright, so our arrival, then we have our missed approach. If we have to go missed, it's going to be, let's see, straight out 261 to Ovnoy, then Buckeye, and then we're going to hold right turns over Buckeye at 5,000 feet. That looks good. That matches the plate. So that's in there. So we verified our arrival and our approach. So what we'll do now is we'll continue setting it up. So if you've watched the localizer video, I said it's kind of like a top hat, which you kind of run through the McDo pages here. So we've just did the flight plan portion. We've checked all of our fixes. Now we're going to get to the RADNAV page. If we were going somewhere where we wanted to hard tune information, this is where we would do it. Such as if you want a distance from the Phoenix VOR, I could hard tune that. But not necessary on this approach. I'm going to let the aircraft auto-tune. The progress page, I like to go ahead and I'll change this up. I'll just go put Phoenix. I'm going to put 25 left in there. That's our runway. So I've got a quick and dirty bearing and distance to the runway should something go wrong and I just need, hey, I need to go to the runway right now. We've got that. The perf page. We are cruising at cost index 99, which is totally fine. As you get to the descent, however, you want to make sure that you adjust this, because if you descend at a cost index of 99, you're going to be coming down at red line, which is 340 knots, 80 Mach. It's going to get a little bit hairy there, especially if there's wind or you're going into a highly congested area. So what I like to do is I will set the descent speed according to several things. One, first and foremost, if there is a note on the arrival saying descend via your current Mach number until reaching the star, then obviously you have to maintain your current Mach number. Or there may be a restriction that says descend via 280 knots or whatever. So if there is not any published restriction, I just take the next best thing. I'm like, okay, well, I'll look at the fixes. I know the first speed restriction in Binker is going to be 280 knots, so why don't I just go ahead and descend at or close to 280. 280 is a little bit low for me. I want to get there. So let's just do 300, and we'll bump it off of the Mach a little bit. We'll go 79 and 300 knots. So that way when we approach Binker, we've only got 20 knots to slow down. Not a big deal. If there was a big tailwind here, let's say we were flying with a really, cooking tailwind, I would actually just put in 280 knots right here and descend at 280. That way I don't have to worry about slowing down. If you've flown the Airbus long enough, you know that it's very difficult to slow down and go down at the same time. Virtually impossible. You got to pick one or the other. So that's our descent profile. Now our approach. We're going to just fill this out like we do with any other approach information. So the QNH is going to be 29092, standard day. Temperature on the ground is 14°C. Winds are calm. Transition altitude is going to be 18,000 feet. Our MDA. Since this is an MDA and not a DA because it's a non-precision approach, depending on which aircraft or which airline you fly for, you may have different policies and procedures regarding your MDA. Where I work, if it's an MDA, we must add 50 feet. MDA must do addition. However, when I look at the approach chart, I can see that with an LNAV, VNAV, which we are capable of doing, I only have a DA. So I don't have to add 50 feet. The DA for the LNAV, VNAV is 1613. Now, if the approach plate said MDA, such as it does on the LNAV portion of the minimums, I would have to add 50 feet. But since we are LNAV and VNAV capable, and this approach calls for a published DA, we can just go ahead and put in our DA of 1613. We're going to land config full, so you can see right here it's bolded. If I wanted to land config 3, I would do that, but definitely want to land config full. 25 left, a little bit of a shorter runway, so we're going to land config full, slow down our VYAP, VLS, 139, 134 respectively. That looks good. Flap retract sequences here. That looks good. Our go-around phase. We've got everything set. That auto-populates. Nothing to do there. We just kind of look at it. And we come to our fuel. So you kind of see I'm working a top hat here. I'm going flight plan, RADNAV. I did progress. I did perf. And now we're doing fuel. I checked the fuel. I've got an hour and 30 extra minutes of gas. Plenty of gas. Not a problem there. The secondary flight plan, I'll go ahead and copy the active. And what we could do is, we could change the runway. I could put, let's say they flipped the airport and said, we want you to do the ILS to runway 8. I would just insert that in the secondary. There is no ILS to 8, is there? Yeah, there is. ILS runway 8. No transition. That's a little weird. Oh, it's in there. Okay, I just didn't see it. It's in there. So, I could have the secondary for runway 8. You know, if you're flying down, they say, hey, we're going to turn the airport around, expect runway 8. You just come here, activate secondary. But in the real world, it's almost easier to just change your primary flight plan than activating the secondary, because if you've flown past a couple of fixes and then you activate your secondary, you've just loaded in fixes that you already flew past, and what can happen is the aircraft will do a 180-degree turn the opposite way and fly into oncoming traffic, which is a big no-no. So unless you're actively copying your active or updating it, then it's really, you know, it's almost easier to just change your primary. But it's good to have just in case. What we would do to go to the McDo menu here, and we would send off for our numbers to get our landing performance. So once we've completed that, that's our top hat. I would print off the landing performance data, which would come out right here through the 8 cars. And then I would select an auto brake selection based on my information. So 2.5 left, you know, you could go to medium brakes if you wanted. I'm just going to use low brakes. And we're going to land flaps full, reverse full. On the overhead, we don't have anything to change up here on a GipWiz. If we were doing a localizer, we would turn the glide slope off. If we were landing in flap 3, we would turn flap 3 on, but we're not. We're landing flaps full. If we were also doing a localizer or ILS, we would turn our LS push buttons on, but since this is an RNAV, or GPS approach, we do not need to turn on these LS push buttons. Alright. Alright, as we approach Phoenix here, I know this is a mountainous terrain airport, so we would put terrain on ND. However, for some reason they only modeled the terrain feature out to, what is it, 40 miles? 40 miles. So I'm just going to keep it off for now, so I can keep my range out a little bit. But in the real airplane, you could go all the way out to 320 with the terrain on, so you kind of get an idea of what's below you. But clear visual day, not a big deal. Alright, as we're approaching driver intersection, we might hear something along the radio, something along the lines of flight factor 320, descend via the ping 1 RNAV arrival, runway 25 left transition. So we know that we have got a descend via clearance, which means we need to descend via the arrival we just checked, comply with all the speed and altitude restrictions, and we're landing 25 left, which we put in the box. We have it right here, so we know we are good to go. So what I'll do is I'll look at the chart, and I look at the bottom altitude for our transition, which for us gips at 4,000 feet, at or above 4,000 feet. So what I'll dial in here is I'm going to just scroll in the bottom 4,000 feet. So when we approach our top of descent point, all I got to do is push the altitude selector knob in for managed descent, and it will descend via our arrival, complying with all of the speeds and the altitude restrictions. Now we definitely want to watch it like a hawk and make sure that that it's doing it correctly, but it makes life a lot easier having that nice VNAV. As we get ready to initiate our descent, normal procedure would be pull up the perf page here, look at our distance to top of descent of 32 miles. I initiate right about 5 miles prior. That way the aircraft has some time to kind of slow down, get the old school processors and the computers all working on the same page before it noses over, especially when you're close to red line like this. It's a smoother transition than waiting till 0 and starting your descent down. Here, let's say air traffic control said, hey, I need you to descend now and maintain 300 and then descend via. So what we do is we'll just go ahead and press the altitude in, and what will happen is the aircraft is just going to descend at 1,000 feet per minute until it captures its predetermined and calculated glide path all the way down. So it doesn't really hurt us very much at all to descend early. Other than you're going to come down a little bit sooner, you might burn a little bit more gas, but Not a big deal. You can see our vertical deviation indicator right here is going up. That's because we have started our descent early, and we are 300 feet and increasing below our calculated descent path. This little squiggly arrow right here, that is our vertical path intercept. So since we started early, and we're only going 1,000 feet per minute, eventually we're going to intercept our calculated descent path, and that's where it's going to happen, is right there where that little squiggly arrow is. So that's always a good indication to have, so you know when are you going to actually intercept your vertical deviation and continue down on an idle descent. Another thing to do once we've started our descent here, we'll move over to the TCAS panel, and I'll go ahead and put it into below mode. That way we can see extra aircraft below us instead of above us. This really doesn't apply anymore as we're going down. And then of course, seatbelt sign will come on. We'll make a PA announcement to the cabin. Hey, we're starting our descent now. We're going to be on the ground at, just about, let's see, 15:20. The time now is 14:54, so just about 25 minutes from now we'll be on the ground. Nice day in Phoenix, 75 degrees. Clear skies and calm winds, right? That's what we'd like. So begin our descent. And that's pretty much it. Now we're kind of in a cruise descent. We're away from the airport a little ways, and we've got plenty of time. The aircraft is set up. We've already mentally covered the entire descent profile, so now we can bring the aircraft there. You always want to make sure wherever the aircraft is going, you have been there mentally several minutes prior. We're in mock descent nav. Here comes our intercept. So you'll see as the aircraft flies into the intercepted glide path, the thrust will actually come back to idle, and it will do its idle descent, which is what we want. We save more fuel. Alright, thrust idle. Here comes the thrust. We're flying into our actual calculated descent path, and now the aircraft will come down on profile as previously calculated. You can see our vertical deviation donut is now coming right back down where it's supposed to be. We check our perf page. Our progress page. And we see we are right on profile now. Another symbol shown here on the ND. This solid pink dot, not to be confused with a magenta D, but a solid pink dot is a deceleration point. Now, what's going to happen at this pink dot, the aircraft is going to decelerate to, you probably guessed it, 280 knots. The aircraft right now is descending at our program descent speed, which I programmed 79300. So you can see right now it's increasing as we transition from the Mach numbers to indicated. It will go to 300, and then once we reach the pink decel dot, it will slow to 280. Now, very important that you don't confuse that dot with the actual deceleration, which I will show you here. Kind of hard to see, but it's right there just outside of GIPS. You see that circled magenta D? Now, I've talked about this in the past. I'm going to cover it again because it is very important. This deceleration point cannot be changed, cannot be modified, and it's going to be on every approach you do. If you are in managed speed, which we are, we have pink speeds, we are in managed speed, and you fly into this deceleration dot, or deceleration symbol, the aircraft is going to slow to VAP, 139 knots. Doesn't matter where you are, what the configuration is, the aircraft will attempt to slow to 139 knots. So, how do we remedy that? In this situation, it's not too big of a deal because you can see it's almost right there as we intercept the final, but still, that's very slow. I don't want to fly the entire final at 139 knots. So, what we do is we activate the approach phase. Now, we only do this, generally speaking, below 10,000 feet. Once we reach 10,000 feet, we activate and confirm the approach phase. Because if I were to do it now, the aircraft would ignore my speeds. So you can see right now we are reaching this deceleration dot, so this should jump down to 280. There it is, 280. The aircraft will slow down and meet the restriction at Binker. So we're going to hold off on this, but we've got to make sure we activate this at 10,000 feet, because if we don't and we forget, when we make the turn over at Gipsy, the aircraft will slow to under 39 knots. All this magenta deceleration symbol does is it activates the approach phase for the airplane, for you. It does it for you. So if you fly into this, you will activate approach phase. So that's why we manually activate approach phase in selected speed at about 10,000 feet. So we're going to come back to that. Right now we need to just continue monitoring our descent, which we are looking good here. We just made the turn over Binker. We are at 280 knots. Our next fix is between 25 and 22. We are approaching our next fix here, Birdie. 250 knots, head above 13,000 feet. We will begin to slow again. There it goes. Now I haven't had the need to use any speed brakes or anything yet. This arrival is pretty well laid out. There is no wind. If you have wind, it always makes it a little bit more challenging, but if you need to use speed brakes to help get down to your fixes, use them as much as you want, because the Airbus it's very common to be using the brakes on the bus. Alright, we are making the turn in towards par. Alright guys, this is where we start to do some things manually on the aircraft now, as we are approaching 10,000 feet. So I remember I said we manually activate the approach phase. Now, if you're on an arrival such as this one, where there are speed restrictions below 10,000 feet, once you activate the approach phase and you are in selected speed, you have to manually adjust the speed. So we'll go ahead and I'm going to demonstrate that for you. I'm going to let the aircraft slow to 230 knots here at par. We are reaching 10,000. Let's go ahead and get our lights on. Our company procedure is to leave the the nose light off. So when we get cleared approach, I'll move it to the taxi position. When we get cleared to land, I'll move it to the takeoff position. That's just an extra reminder for myself to, hey, did we get cleared to land? Yeah, we got cleared to land. I can just verify that. Alright, as we get to 10,000 feet here, we're going to manually activate the approach phase. So to do this, I need to select speed. And I should select 230 knots because that's what the aircraft needs to be at for par. Now, I'm going to come here, I'm going to go perf, I'm going to activate and confirm. Now the reason I am in selected speed is because if I were in managed speed now, the aircraft would decelerate to 139 knots. We obviously don't want to do that because we have 210 knot restriction here, and we're still quite a ways out. So always make sure when you activate your approach phase at 10,000 that you are in selected speed. And now we just have to actually be pilots and adjust the speed accordingly. So I know Perky is at between 9 and 8 at 210 knots. So I'm going to manually reduce here momentarily. You can also see now that I've got our vertical deviation indicator is up on the screen. This is what we referred to as the brick. Here comes 9,000. Once I'm below 9, I'm going to just go ahead and dial the speed back a little bit early to keep the aircraft ahead of schedule. Ahead of schedule is good. Behind schedule is no good. Alright, let's go ahead and reduce to 210 knots as requested per the star. Now, as I slow to 210 here, you see I've got my VFE. Once we get 10 knots below that, it's when you can extend flaps. Now, in this case, 210 knots is right at green dot, so I'm going to go ahead and extend flaps 1. If, depending on your weights, if you're still above green dot and this far from the airport, you don't have to configure this early, but I'm going to go ahead and configure since we're going to be right at green dot. So we are VFE minus 10, flaps come to 1. Alright, we are flaps 1. Now we just need to make sure we stay on path here. FinApp below 6 and 5. Gipsy is at above 4,000. You can see the level off stick is right there, as well as the descend stick. So it's kind of hard to tell. It's kind of an interesting depiction because the way the course is turning there, but it looks like the level off is going to be just before Gips, so that's good. We're ahead of schedule. Remember, 2,000 feet above field elevation is when you want to manage speed and start configuring all the way down. And we want to hit that 2,000 foot window above field at 180 knots and flaps 2. If you've been following my videos, I say that every time when you're on approach. At 2,000 feet above touchdown, be at 180 knots, flaps 2, and you should be able to get configured and full flaps by 1,000 feet every single time. Alright, let's say air traffic comes on, says flight factor 320. You are cleared, RNAV 25 left approach via Gipsy. Contact tower on 18.5. So we'll go ahead and we'll switch over to 18.5. I don't know if that's the proper frequency, I just threw that in there. And since I'm cleared approach, I'm going to go ahead and move the taxi light into the taxi position. So now what I can do is I could go ahead and arm approach mode, but I'm going to wait just a little bit more until we pass these this final approach fix here of FinApp. I actually grew up in this part of the world over here, right here in Phoenix. That's Falcon Field, I believe. Yep, FFZ, Falcon Field, just off the nose there. I did my fair share of practice approaches into that airport as a student pilot. Alright, we are approaching FinApp. We are below 6, above 5. Everything looks good. I'm going to go ahead and arm the approach since we are cleared approach. So now we have alt final. What we are looking for is final app, which means everything has been intercepted and it will track us down to our MDA or DA. The reason it says alt final right now is because we are still showing a level off just prior to Gipsy. So it's going to level off most likely and then start down again. We'll see here. Oh, now it's getting closer. You could see... There we go. It looks like the perfect storm, really. We call that the perfect storm. Once the level off stick and descend stick are exactly the same, that means you're going to continue down on a constant descent, which is what we like to do. As we get here close on final, I'm going to go ahead and start reducing to 180 knots. Remember, 2,000 feet above field at this airport, if I look at the chart, is... Let's see, touchdown is 1126, so we'll just call it 3,100 feet. We'll call it 3,200 feet. It'll be our window, 3,200 MSL. Just trying to get a little high on me there. We're cleared approach, so I'm going to actually deal this down all the way to 3,000. Which is our final approach fix altitude. And Phoenix Tower, flight factor 320, RNAV 25 left, say flight factor 320, you're clear to land, runway 25 left. Clear to land, 25 left, flight factor 320. I've got the brakes out a little bit here, let's go for laps 2, speed checks. And And we're going to be a little bit high, so we'll go open descent. Try to get down to 3,000 feet here. We're just a couple hundred feet high here on the approach. So let's go ahead and... well, let's see, we're going to level off right on time, hopefully. Why are you speeding up? There's 3,200 feet. Let's push for managed speed. There she goes. Going to start to decel. Final lap. It's captured. We're at 3,100. Gear coming down. BFE next minus 10. Flaps 3. We are on final lap, so we can set a go-around altitude of 5,000 feet. And let's go VFU next minus 10, flaps full. And landing checklist. Cabin crew advised, auto thrust, speed, ECAM memo, landing on green, the landing check is complete. You're cleared to land on 25 left. Alright, so now the aircraft is just following its RNAV path down to our MDA. Now we can go ahead and fly this all the way down on autopilot until the MDA. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect. Autopilot off. And let's go ahead and turn the flight directors off. And we're just going to do a visual approach here. I'm going to go ahead and give myself the bird by using track FPA.
Minimum.
There's our minimum. Runway's in sight. We are landing.
300. 200. 100. 50. 40. 30. 20. Retard. Retard fired.
Spoilers. Reverse is green. Manual brakes. 70 knots. Might have been a little firm on the touchdown there, but not bad. It's a short runway. I'd much rather get down than be hanging around float. We'll leave our lights on as we cross the parallel runway. Alright, once we are clear of all runways, we'll go ahead and do an after landing checklist. So I'll go ahead and kill the lights, except the taxi light, and beacon and nav. Go ahead and retract the flaps, which they are. This comes to TA only. I'm sorry, this comes to standby over here on the transponder. Auto brakes are off. We'll go ahead and fire up the APU. Now, one thing I forgot to do here, since I landed with full reverse, I should have started the chronometer. Well, the FO probably would have started it for me after I brought the thrust levers to idle, because you need a 3-minute cooldown after going into maximum reverse before shutting down any of the engines. Alright, as we taxi onto the ramp area here, we'll go ahead and turn our taxi light off. That way the rampers know that we have seen them. Also don't want to blind anybody on the ramp. I know it's daytime, but if it were nighttime. Alright, we'll go ahead and just park it right here between these two United planes. Looks like a good Airbus parking spot. Safety zone looks clear. Brakes set. APU is available. Signs coming off. Kill the engines. Interesting firelight there. Bunch of just nuisance warnings there on the shutdown. Nothing to worry about. Let's go ahead and get the chocks on. Probably start hearing all these noises. Doors are opening up. Go ahead and turn everything else off. Fuel pumps come off. We'll turn the APU bleed on. Some air in here. Transponder goes to standby 2000. That's just a code so we know that the aircraft doesn't have a squawk yet. And we can run a shutdown checklist. That will pretty much end it. So at this point, the crew will we'll hop out, get our bags, and get out of here.